the great-grandchildren of J.A. and Flora Kemp. Will you please begin by telling us your full name and where you currently reside?
My name is Linda Kemp Anthony, and I reside at 11224 Whitson Avenue in Kensington, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And I've lived there for 20 years. And what else did I supposed
That's
to...
fine.
Okay.
And my name is Tom Hamilton. I live in Sunset Hills, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, and I've lived there for over 30 years.
What is your relationship in the Kemp family? Please start with Flora and Joseph Kemp and trace your family to you and your children with full names where possible.
Our great-grandparents are J.A. and Flora Kemp. One of their daughters, perhaps their youngest daughter, was Bertha May, and she is our maternal grandmother. I have no children of my own.
But I have two children, Amy Rose Anthony, and my son is named Joseph after J.A. Kemp, Joseph James Anthony. And they were both adopted from South Korea. So my son is proud to, in fact, he told me that he's on the internet recently to find out a lot about, which is out there, about his namesake, J.A. Kemp.
Tell us about your motivation for coming to Wichita Falls, and if you visited here before, when?
I have not visited here since I was 13 did we say? Maybe 13 years old. Been a very long time since I've been back. But I ran into somebody in Washington that was from Midwest State University, and we got to talking, and I just told her the connection I had to Wichita Falls, and Diane Spiller was the person, and we've just jabbered, finding common interests, and she's the one who started, I think, getting everything together to have me come, and I said there's no way I could do this without having my brother, who is the historian of the family. So he's also here because of that.
And we've always been proud of our heritage in Wichita Falls and what these two people meant to the city, and we certainly want to promote that, I guess, or be a part of that and remember it as much as we can. In their honor and in honor of our mother, who cannot be here today. She's 85 and is not able to travel, but she's here in spirit, and for that we're grateful.
What are your memories, if any, of your family's homes here?
Neither one of us lived actually in Wichita Falls, but had traveled here several times as youngsters. The Kemp home at 10th and Grant was sold to the Alexander Clinic in 1947, and my great-grandmother moved to a smaller home at 1814 Huff Street, and she resided there for the last 10 years of her life. The home next to the Kemp mansion at 9th and Grant was built in 1910 as a wedding gift to their oldest daughter, Sybil. At 9th and Tilden, they built a home for their son, Anderson, and at 10th and Tilden, they built a home for their daughter, Jewel Langford. So at one point, that entire city block was owned by the Kemps, and all of the homes were Kemp homes. My mother having a recollection as a granddaughter and a youngster of riding bicycles through interconnected driveways that connected all four homes. And she has many stories of how much fun it was to play with her cousins and siblings, one sibling, around the home. So I think my sister and I remember our Aunt Sybil's home probably the most, because when we were old enough, the Kemp home, even though it was still standing at that time, was not a part of the family. So we never really had ever set foot inside the home. But Aunt Sybil's home, yes, we remember that thoroughly. And
It had the big staircase.
grand
So
staircase,
similar.
circular, that came up from the front door.
Right.
Four front pillars on the front, a terrazzo porch as you walked up, and the garage is still standing from that home at 9th and Grant. But it burned in a fire tragically in 1963. My great uncle had moved, had sold the home. His wife, Sybil, died in 1961, and he sold the home. And in 63 it burned, and tragically a small female child died in the fire. But that home is gone.
What are some of the individual family memories that you were told by your mother about the Kemps or Kells?
Well, my mother, having been born here on Morningside Drive, we think at 400 Morningside Drive.
We're going to try to check that one out.
We are. We're going to try to authenticate that. But
Yes.
she had a wonderful childhood, and she has memories of having meals at the Kemp home, and again with her cousins and siblings. Everything was always, there's a lot of activity and things to do. She has very fond memories of her childhood here. She moved away with her mother, and in 1930 her mother got a divorce, and they moved back to Wichita Falls, and she was here from 1930 through 1938 when she graduated from Wichita Falls High School, and then went to college at Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois. So through her formative teenage years, she lived not only here, but in the Kemp home. And has quite a few stories of her Uncle Newton, who lived next door, and all sorts of fun and fond memories of family members.
Since we preserve the Kell House as a museum, we're interested in any memories you may have of your Kell relatives. Who did you know personally, and what events, if any, do you recall involving the Kell family?
Now, Tom would have some memories. I don't.
The only actually Kell member that I remember meeting personally was Sybil Kell Cahoon, who lived at 602 Fillmore. And we had been with her several times. My parents used to travel to San Antonio. My dad was an Air Force retiree, and would spend some time in the San Antonio area with all the 4 Air Force bases there. And on their way down, they would stop typically to see Sybil. And one of the trips I went with them and met her as well. Very, very cultured woman, nice lady, and everyone loved her. I had passed through on vacation in 1977, and at that time her husband Wilbur was still alive, and we spent some time with both of them at that time. So I had met her on 2 occasions, and that's the only Kell daughter that I really remember.
You didn't come to the Kell house itself, and you did not visit or know Willie Mae or
That's
Bess
correct.
during
I
their time?
never met Willie Mae.
Never met Willie Mae, okay. Tell us, for the record here, so we have it preserved, tell us again about the lamps, the table, and the clock that originally were in the Kemp home and now you have donated for the Kell collection.
The Parlor Lamps were purchased in France when my great-grandparents traveled abroad. And they were in the living room of the Kemp home on either side of the main fireplace. They were electric, and eventually were cut down to adorn a smaller fireplace that my mother had. She inherited them, but they were originally in the main living room. The table is I think it's teak, and it is inlaid pearl that came from Russia. It was had a companion small table that they purchased. My mother inherited the taller table. My uncle inherited the smaller round table. Unfortunately, it did not survive, and whereas the taller table did, and was in good enough condition that we felt was suitable for donation. It is put together with wooden pegs. There's not a metal screw in that, and perhaps that's why it's lasted so long. And then the Banjo Clock was the clock that great-grandmother had in her bedroom, and she loved that clock. And I think then the photo was from the Kemp home, and it was about 1907, fairly soon after the home was built.
Who are other Kemp or Kell family members with whom you're still in touch, and where do they reside currently?
We have a cousin, Carol Booth, who is the daughter of Alfred, who is the brother of our mother. So she too is a great-granddaughter of J.A. Kemp. She resides in Henderson, Nevada, currently. The others that we know of that are still living, Connie Patton, who would be the granddaughter of Sybil and Newton Mayer, again a great-granddaughter of J.A. Kemp. Anderson had 2 children, Joanne and Joe. We know that they're still alive, but I don't know, they're not living in Wichita Falls. My mother knows that they're still, she corresponds with them periodically, so we know they're still alive.
And she could probably,
And we could
Fine.
probably fill that in as to where they are,
right.
Anderson's kids. Jewel, she had one son, David Langford, who passed away in 1998. She also adopted a son, Stanmore, who around World War II time left, and he's never been heard from again, so we don't know what happened to him. But she adopted him as a son, and don't know what happened, what his fate was.
I have to follow that up with something. Was this in connection with World War II in some way?
We
or
don't
was that
know.
simply the time?
I think he went off to war and just, but as the story goes, he was not killed in war, or we don't know that he was, but it was around that time frame, and no one ever heard from him again. So we literally, that's a question mark that we just can't fulfill.
Are there any other facts, stories, anything that you would like us to know about your family that you have thought someone really ought to know about this?
Well, maybe humorous anecdotes, or the one that comes to mind, our great uncle, Newton Mayer, who lived next to the Kemps, prided himself on maintaining a meticulous lawn, to the point where not only did he hire people to take care of his property, but he also put his own touch on it and maybe trimmed a little here and mowed a little extra there. And one particular day, he was out near the street tending to probably one of the plantings that he had out there, and this woman, total stranger, stopped and commented on what a lovely job that she assumed that he was the caretaker, and mistook him for the person that was taking care of the property, and said, "You've done such a wonderful job. Would you like to come to work for me and take care of my property?" And without missing a beat, he said, "Well, ma'am, I would be happy to, but I need to tell you that the woman of the house here lets me sleep with her." And with that, that was that. The woman drove off, and he probably chuckled to himself as she drove off.
And he actually, we have remembrances of coming to visit Aunt Sybil and Uncle Newton, and he would have stories of little Mousie, and
He loved children.
He loved children, and he, while Aunt Sybil might have been just a little more austere, a little more prim, he'd get down with the kids and play with us, and I guess
Had a dry sense of humor.
he did have a tremendously funny, dry sense of humor. And my mom remembers when they would have sleepovers at the
Kemp home,
Kemp
next door.
home, and it would be out on the sleeping porches, that she does remember Uncle Newton coming creeping over and just scaring the daylights out of the kids that were sleeping out on the porch. Yes. So.
He became her surrogate father when her own father divorced Bertha May in 1930, and she would have been 8 years old. Newton then actually became more of a father figure to her, so she remembers him very fondly as that.
The family kind of fell apart there, Mom's family, when the crash of '29 happened, and my great-grandfather bailed out as many people that were in the bank. He owned the
City National
City
Bank. He
National
was
Bank.
president of that bank for many years, and probably as such felt a personal connection to many of the investors who were in the bank, and did not want to stand by and watch them and their fortunes fail. So he, much to the, I guess, his own detriment financially, but Frank Hill had also warned him, Jody, this is something that's happening all over the country, and it's not something that you or I can stop. So you really, if it's going to fail, let it fail. It's something we'll have to rebuild. But he really had tried to persuade great-grandfather not to spend his own money, and much to his regret, the bank failed anyway, and much of his fortune was spent trying to help others. Frank Hill did not do that, and certainly nothing against Uncle Frank whatsoever, but just how the two men approached things differently.
Do we have anything else that you would like to comment? Anything else?
I don't think we have your mother's name on the tape.
Oh, right.
Her-
Constance Booth was her married name. Hamilton. Her maiden name is Booth. Her married name is Hamilton.
She was born here in Wichita in 1922.
And yeah, I think you need to tell, because you know more about Alfred Berkeley Booth, and how my grandmother met him.
He was an aviator in World War I and had flown into Call Field. And I guess socially had met her and swept her off her feet, a dashing young man in uniform. One thing led to another, and they were married within a year. And as I think we had said before, or maybe we didn't, the great-grandmother and great-grandfather, after having purchased these plots of land around their own home for wedding gifts, by the time our grandmother got married, there was no more land. So we understand that's when they purchased land on Morningside Drive and built this home for our grandmother Bertha May. And both Bertha May's son Alfred and our mother were born in that home. So we are told.
And they must have lived there for a few years when they were very young, and then they moved because our grandfather was from the Chicago area, Evanston, Illinois, and he then moved his wife and 2 children back up north. So, and then in 1930, when
In the summer.
they divorced,
Mhm.
right? And at the same time, our great-grandfather died, and
That was November.
sort of at that same time, it seemed fitting for my grandmother to come back to Wichita Falls with her 2 children when my mom was 8 and my uncle was 11,
Yes.
and that's where they were raised then. Until my uncle went off to MIT, and my mother then went to Northwestern. And my grandmother, Bertha May, had no real roots in Wichita Falls, and felt, in fact, that she kind of like what my mom said. I said, "Mom, why did you end up going to North instead of the University of Texas?" And she said, well, it was really her mom's idea, Bertha May's idea, to get out of Wichita Falls. I guess at that point, life had become pretty stilted for her, and she wanted to get back up north. She had made friends back up north, so that's how Tom and I were raised outside of Chicago. We never did come back and live in Wichita Falls.
Because my mother met our father at Northwestern, And they decided then to, by that time, Bertha May had met and married her second husband, Frank Parker, who lived in Highland Park, Illinois, a suburb, northern suburb of Chicago. And when my mother and father were looking to build their home, they decided to join them in Highland Park, and that's pretty much where we've all been ever since.
And your father's name?
Woodrow, who's now deceased, died in 2003. But mother is still alive. And I think, just in terms of an overall lasting memory, we're proud of, I think, the type of man Joseph Kemp was. Very self-effacing, very much wanting to leave something for the city, to help build it, to help its citizens. Not for personal gain whatsoever, but for the gain of all. And that's probably why he made many investments. Some were good, some were not. The glass ball factory, and this man had an idea that instead of the little steel ball bearings that were used in industry, if he could make them out of glass, they'd be cheaper. And it was an idea that probably didn't hold a lot of merit on the surface, but Grandfather Kemp believed in him and wanted, if he was willing to come to Wichita Falls and build an industry, let's do it. So he helped funded that, and of course it went south. There was also the story of a man that wanted to, he had devised a formula for a soft drink that he felt could compete with Coca-Cola in Atlanta. And my great-grandfather felt that this is probably something that will never come of it, so in that instance he decided not to fund that venture.
Too bad.
And that venture was Dr. Pepper. So I guess the adage, you win some and you lose some, holds true in his case. But in his heart, he wanted to improve life for North Texas, and in particular Wichita Falls, which is why he had his, perhaps the primary vision of irrigation is his lasting monument, to bring water to a city that he knew was going to grow well beyond what it was when he was alive. And unless it had water in North Texas, there's no way that the city could grow to that level. So he spent all of his time and energy and a good part of his fortune to make sure that the legislation was passed, and many trips to Austin, and actually that's where he was when he died, talking to the Texas legislature one more time to help them fund this, and several trips to Washington, D.C. And Congress. So he was very, very adamant about wanting to do what he could to help the people of Wichita Falls. And for that, we're very proud.
And I'm very proud of my great-grandmother, who was a wonderful soulmate to him, to J.A. Kemp. But she had the real goal of educating everyone, of making sure that education was a strong part of the culture of the
Absolutely.
Of the part of the town, and therefore that's why she wanted to get a library for the town, which had no library.
The Women's Club?
The Women's Club. She was very much on her own terms a woman that was very much J.A.'s equal. They were,
in many respects, that's true.
They
The
were
day nursery,
strong.
all of that.
They were a very strong couple in their own rights.
Pioneer spirit, both of them.
Yes, I do think that's one thing that I'm so proud of, is the pioneer spirit of our forefathers to bring us so far.
They never let adversity get them down. And hopefully that is a model we all can live by.
Yes, and I think this town seems to have appreciated it and grown, and has not let it their sight, their vision of this, where this town can go, because I think there's a lot more that this town can do.
Absolutely.
And will do.
The city that faith built.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for your time and your memories.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.